She said, "You could disappear and no one would miss you." So I did, and left the house, the trust, and the truth behind. "You could disappear and no one would miss you," Vanessa said, and everyone laughed, except me. The words didn't sting at first, not in the way you'd expect. They settled into me like a slow-moving splinter, pressing deeper the longer I stood there, pie dish in hand, my smile stretched just enough to hide what I felt behind my eyes. The laughter around me was light and effortless. Clayton chuckling politely, neighbors letting out wine-soaked giggles, even little Ella letting out a sheepish titter as she adjusted the strap on her sundress. And I just nodded the way I always had. I think the moment that broke something in me came a full 20 seconds after the words were spoken, when the conversation shifted to something entirely different. Just like that, like nothing had happened, like I wasn't even there. A few hours earlier, I'd stood in my tiny kitchen brushing egg wash over the pie crust with the edge of my thumb, just like my mother taught me. I'd chosen the good apples, the ones from the orchard off Highway 18 that always had just the right amount of tart. I hadn't made that pie for myself in years, but Clayton used to love it. Even when he was 10 and scowled at vegetables, he always finished his slice down to the last syrupy crumb. I'd tied a clean ribbon around the pie carrier. Even brought hydrangeas from the garden. I still remembered Vanessa saying once that they were her favorite. She never planted any, but I suppose that's not the same as loving them. I'd snip the biggest blooms and arrange them in a simple glass vase. Maybe I thought they'd notice. Maybe I thought those small gestures would remind them of who I was. It was warm that afternoon in Willow Glen, the kind of bright, showy spring day that made the whole neighborhood look like it had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. The barbecue had been Clayton's idea, or so he said. "65's a big one, Mom. Let us host," he'd insisted on the phone. I imagined him in his kitchen, nodding to Vanessa as he said it, checking with her before inviting his own mother to her own party. Their backyard was as polished as always, the lawn clipped to perfection, the patio furniture from that high-end outdoor store downtown, matching citronella candles flickering in silver holders. There was a Bluetooth speaker playing some soft pop tune I didn't recognize, and Vanessa had laid out a spread that could have been photographed for a blog. Charcuterie board with 3 kinds of fig jam, artisanal buns wrapped in linen, shrimp skewers drizzled in something green. I arrived early. Of course I did. I always did. Ella had run out first, gave me a polite hug around the waist before returning to her phone. Lucas barely looked up from the tablet he held in both hands like a life raft. Clayton met me at the door, offered me a glass of wine before I could decline. "Glad you made it, Mom," he said, already scanning the patio. Vanessa, perfectly put together in a white summer dress and lemon-colored cardigan, offered me a too-tight smile. "Oh, hydrangeas," she said. "Lovely." Then she passed them to the housekeeper without a second glance. I'd brought my pie, too, of course. Set it gently on the kitchen counter, only to notice a store-bought cheesecake already displayed front and center. No one said anything about the pie, so I didn't either. The party buzzed around me, neighbors catching up on vacation plans, Vanessa's cousin going on about her new Tesla, someone from the school board making thin-lipped comments about the state test scores. I drifted to the patio where Ella sat bent over a science project, something to do with magnets, I think. I knelt beside her, grateful for the distraction, and we talked in low voices as I helped her align metal filings on a small sheet of cardboard. That's when I heard it. Vanessa's voice lilting and loud. "Can you believe Margaret next door? 70 years old and signing up for a painting class in Italy. Who does she think she's fooling?" The words sliced through the air like a knife dressed in pearls. Her audience giggled. "Her kids must be mortified," someone added. I kept my eyes on the cardboard. My hands shook slightly, but I held the smile for Ella's sake. "Not everyone wants to be defined by their children and grandchildren," I said softly. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was sharp and sudden. A few heads turned. I felt Clayton's gaze fall on me. "Oh, Mom," he said in that tone, half placating, half annoyed. "You know that's not how it works." Then Vanessa laughed again, head tilted to catch the sunlight in her perfect bob. "Honestly, Dorothy, you could disappear and no one would miss you. You barely leave that house anyway." And then the laughter. The whole backyard rippled with it. Not loud, not mean, not overtly. Just easy. Just enough. Clayton chuckled. Her cousin chuckled. Even Lucas made a noise that might have been a laugh or just discomfort. Ella looked at me, then back down. And I nodded. That's all I did. I nodded and said, "You might be right about that." The conversation moved on. Someone brought up a neighbor's broken fence. Vanessa poured more wine, but something inside me, something that had curled up and taken the pain for years, unfolded. That evening, I left early. No one stopped me. No one offered to walk me to the car. I carried the empty pie dish in one hand. The hydrangeas never made it outside. Back home, the house was still. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, those old, loyal sounds. I set the dish in the sink and stared at the photo on the refrigerator door. It was from 2 summers ago, Clayton and Vanessa with the kids on the beach. I wasn't in it. I never was. I sat at the kitchen table, resting my hands on the wood worn smooth by years of meals and homework and holiday prep. I thought about the Christmas when I suggested bikes for the kids and was told that's not practical. They got tablets instead. I thought about the time Vanessa had a migraine and I canceled my book club to babysit, only to see photos of her shopping on social media the next day. I thought about the family trip to Hilton Head, where I paid half the cost but was given the couch in the smallest room and handed a list of groceries to buy on the first morning. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my words, chosen peace over pride, waited for someone else to notice I was fading. Then I thought about Robert, about how, before he passed, he'd made me promise I'd never lose myself in other people's needs. "Keep something just for you," he'd said, "even if it's small." I hadn't listened, not until now. I rose, went to the bedroom, and opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were the things I'd held onto without knowing why. The letter from Robert on our 20th anniversary, the watch he wore every day for 25 years, my mother's pearls tucked inside a soft pouch, and near the bottom, the red dress I'd bought for my 60th birthday, the one Vanessa called a little desperate. I touched the fabric soft and brave in my hands. Then I went to the closet and pulled out my old suitcase. No one noticed when I left that party early. No one asked if I got home safe. No one texted to thank me for the flowers or the pie. But I remember standing in that kitchen, the one I'd cleaned 1,000 times, and realizing the silence wasn't sad, it was liberating. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky outside was soft and pink, the kind of color that comes just before something breaks open. I put on a pot of coffee, sat at the table, and watched the steam rise. Then I picked up the phone and called Virginia. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but concerned. "Ginny," I said, "I need to talk, and I need a plan." She paused. Then, in that steady voice I'd trusted for 30 years, she said, "I'm listening." By noon, I had appointments with her and a real estate agent. That afternoon, I began sorting through the house. 43 years of memories. And now I was choosing what to keep, not for them, but for me. And for the first time in a long, long while. I felt awake. I nodded that day. But the next morning, I started packing. I didn't leave angry. I left awake. By the time the sun rose the next day, something inside me had hardened, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I stood at the window with my coffee in hand, watching the shadows shrink back across the lawn. The kitchen held its usual early morning hush, but this time I didn't feel trapped in it. I felt free. I remembered the last time Robert and I had stood in this kitchen together, back when the children were still young. He had leaned against the counter, hands curled around his chipped navy mug, and said, "When the time comes, you'll know." He'd meant the practical matters, banking, taxes, insurance, but I took it as something more, a whisper of foresight from a man who had always seen me clearer than anyone else. Now I knew. The time had come. I pulled the yellow legal pad from the drawer next to the refrigerator, the one where I kept everything from grocery lists to emergency contacts, and began to write. Not letters, not explanations, just a list, a plan. First, call Virginia, then the real estate agent. After that, begin packing. I titled the page Exit Strategy, and for the first time in a decade, I smiled without effort. It was just past 8 when I called Ginny. Her voice came through crisp and warm, a welcome change from the clipped tones I'd grown used to with Vanessa. "You all right, Dorothy?" she asked, clearly sensing something had shifted. "Better than I've been in a long time," I told her. "I need to come in, today if possible." There was a pause, then, "I'll clear my afternoon. Come at 2. I hung up and immediately dialed Marie Coleman, the agent who had sold the Henderson place down the street last fall. She picked up on the 3rd ring and greeted me by name. "I'm ready to sell," I said, quickly and quietly. By noon, I had appointments with both of them scheduled back to back. I stood in the middle of the living room surrounded by decades of collected furniture, family photos, heirlooms. I ran my hand across the arm of the floral couch where Clayton had lain with the flu at age 7, where Ella had napped as a baby, where I'd fallen asleep more times than I could count, waiting for the sound of someone's key in the lock. Now it was all just furniture. I started with the hall closet. Tossed expired medications, mismatched gloves, old wrapping paper rolls. I worked steadily, drawer by drawer, shelf by shelf. In the bedroom, I opened the cedar chest again. This time, I laid each item out on the bed. Robert's watch, my mother's pearl earrings, a faded photograph of us standing in front of the courthouse where we'd married, smiling like fools in love. Then, from the bottom, I lifted the red dress. It still smelled faintly of lavender. I folded it carefully and placed it in the suitcase. That afternoon, Ginny greeted me in her office with a firm hug and a soft smile. Her glasses perched low on her nose, and her blouse had a small ink smudge near the collar. She looked at me for a long moment, then gestured to the chair across from her desk. "All right," she said. "Tell me everything." I did. I told her about the party, about Vanessa's comment and the laughter, about the missed birthdays and the intercepted gifts I now suspected, about the way Clayton looked at me, when he looked at me at all. I spoke steadily, and Ginny listened without interrupting, her pen only scratching the page when absolutely necessary. When I finished, she folded her hands and leaned back. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice gentle. "This hasn't felt like home in a long time," I said. "It's just a place where I keep things people expect me to have when they need them." She nodded slowly, reaching for a manila folder. "We'll draft the listing transfer paperwork, set up a revocable trust for the grandchildren, and establish new banking. Do you want power of attorney protections added in case they try anything clever?" I looked her in the eye. "Yes, and I want the trust set up so it's available only when they turn 21. I want them to show they understand what kindness is, not just inherit it." Ginny didn't flinch. "I'll make it airtight." As I signed the initial forms, her hand brushed mine. "But Dorothy, what about Clayton? What about the children?" I hesitated, looking down at my signature. "He stopped seeing me years ago, and she's teaching them to do the same." When I left her office, the sun had dropped low enough to cast long shadows across the parking lot. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing in the faint scent of leather and old coffee. Then I drove to the bank. Mr. Kirkland had been managing my account since Robert died. He still wore a tie clip and used a fountain pen. When I explained my plans, he looked surprised, but said nothing unkind. "That's a substantial withdrawal, Mrs. Linscott," he said gently. "Everything all right?" "Everything's finally going to be," I replied, signing the slip. He walked me out to my car, hand on my elbow like a true gentleman, and said, "You take care now." Back at home, I moved with purpose. I packed only what mattered. 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on. The rest I'd leave behind. I wrote 3 envelopes, one for Clayton, with the house keys, passwords, and instructions about the plants. One for Ginny, with details about the trust and my new address for formal delivery, and one for Ella and Lucas. I didn't write much, just enough. I've decided to take Vanessa's advice. Since no one would miss me, I'm leaving. I placed the envelopes on the dining table and covered them with the placemat embroidered with daisies that Ella had given me when she was 6. At 6:40 the next morning, I called for a taxi. I was already dressed. Blue cardigan, slacks, and sensible shoes. My small bags waited by the door like quiet accomplices. As I waited, I stood in the kitchen, tracing my fingers along the counter where I had once helped Clayton make pancakes, where Lucas had stood on a stool to mix cookie dough, where I had stood alone more times than I cared to admit, preparing meals that no one complimented or even noticed. Mrs. Peterson from next door was just collecting her newspaper when the taxi pulled up. She waved. "Going somewhere nice, Dorothy?" I smiled. Steady and real. Yes, somewhere I should have gone a long time ago. She tilted her head, curious, but I didn't offer more. At the train station, I purchased a one-way ticket to Seabrook Hollow, a little town I hadn't visited since Robert and I honeymooned there nearly 46 years ago. Back then, it had been just a sleepy fishing village with a diner and a bed and breakfast that smelled of salt and lemon. I didn't know what it looked like now, but I remembered the sound of the waves outside our window. That was enough. The train arrived on time. As it pulled away, I watched my life shrink into the distance. The church where Robert and I married, the school where I had volunteered for book fairs, the grocery store where Vanessa once told me, "We've got it covered this year, thanks," when I offered to pick up Thanksgiving groceries. No one knew where I was going. No one even knew I'd left. The thought should have scared me, but it didn't. Not one bit. Across the aisle sat an elderly man with a trim gray beard and a worn paperback in his lap. He smiled at me kindly, then asked, "First time traveling alone?" "No," I said, surprising myself with the truth. "But it's the first time I've traveled as myself." The rhythm of the train soothed me. Outside, the familiar gave way to the new. Rolling hills, fields dotted with cattle, small towns with water towers painted like peaches. With every mile, something heavy lifted. I imagined Vanessa walking into the house and finding it silent, the living room empty, the coffee table bare, Clayton calling my name with that slight edge of annoyance he'd developed, only to find the envelopes. Would he be angry? Would he panic? I didn't know, and I no longer needed to. As the sun began to set, painting the world in oranges and soft pinks, I tilted my head back and let the motion of the train cradle me. My phone, still turned off, rested at the bottom of my purse. I didn't need it. For the first time in over 40 years, no one was waiting for me to solve their problem. No one was calling for my help. No one was giving me orders or lists or passive-aggressive comments masked as concern. And I didn't leave a note on the fridge. Not this time. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't leave a note on the fridge. Just silence and freedom. By the time they realized I was gone, I was already 3 counties away. I didn't check my phone that first morning in Seabrook Hollow. I didn't unpack right away either. I just sat on the little porch of my rental cottage with a cup of coffee, watching the mist roll in from the coast. The ocean was just a few blocks down. I couldn't see it yet, but I could hear it, faint and steady, like a breath taken in and out. The cottage was small but clean, pale blue shutters, a little white gate that squeaked when I pushed it open, flower boxes under the windows, waiting to be filled. It reminded me of the house Robert and I had once dreamed of buying before Clayton was born, before real life swept in and told us we needed more rooms and less whimsy. Inside, The furniture was mismatched in the charming way that made you feel someone had lived there before you and been happy. The walls bore faint outlines where pictures had once hung, and the bedroom window looked out over a hibiscus bush humming with bees. That morning, I walked to the small downtown area, if you could call it that. A handful of shops, a corner cafe, a used bookstore with wind chimes over the door. I wandered slowly, stopping to touch seashell necklaces and thumb through old paperback novels. I bought a new notepad and a pack of colored pencils. I hadn't drawn anything since high school, but something in me wanted to try. I met Marge that first week, owner of the bookstore, stubborn as a mule, heart as soft as a biscuit. She asked where I was from. I gave her a town name without much more. "Running from something or running to something?" she asked, not unkindly. "Maybe a little of both," I said. She didn't press. She just invited me to her weekly card game and offered me a discount on the local author's shelf. By the second week, I was walking the beach each morning. By the third, I had joined a watercolor class at the community center. I hadn't told anyone my last name. I didn't have to. And still, I didn't turn on my phone. I didn't want to know. I imagined the voicemail count growing like mold, text messages piling up from Clayton, from Vanessa, maybe even from Ella or Lucas, though I doubted it. They hadn't texted me directly in months. Everything had been filtered through Vanessa's phone, even on birthdays. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed this space. This time. This quiet. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, while painting a still life of lemons in a chipped bowl, Gloria, a red-headed retired school counselor from Ohio, tapped my shoulder. "There's a woman outside asking for you," she said. "Says she's an attorney." My heart stuttered, not in fear, in memory. Ginny. I hadn't expected her so soon. She stood in the community center garden, completely out of place in her charcoal gray pantsuit among the rows of snapdragons and sunflowers. Her heels sank slightly into the mulch, but her face lit up when she saw me. "You look wonderful," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Younger, somehow." "I feel light," I replied, surprised by my own words. We walked to the Harbor Cafe. Same wicker chairs, same view of the fishing boats bobbing lazily in the water. Ginny ordered coffee, black. I asked for chamomile. We didn't speak much until the drinks arrived. Then she opened her briefcase. "The house sold," she began, sliding a printout toward me. "Above asking, even in this market." I stared at the number. Enough, more than enough. Enough to never have to ask for anything again. "I've handled all the distributions," she continued, "and the trust is active. Your instructions were followed to the letter. Educational funds only, released at 21, and only after a personal meeting with either you or me. No parental access." I exhaled. The kind of breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for weeks, maybe years. "And?" I asked. Ginny folded her hands. "They didn't notice right away," she said softly. "It took almost 3 weeks." I blinked. 3? "They assumed you were just being quiet again," she said. "Then, when Clayton stopped by and found the house empty, well, things escalated quickly." I could picture it. The moment Vanessa realized she no longer had control, the plans she'd made in her head unraveling, kitchen remodels, private school tuition, all floating out of reach. Ginny continued. Vanessa started calling, then texting. Clayton reached out with veiled threats, concerns over your mental capacity, hints at legal intervention. I laughed, quietly, without humor, because only a crazy woman would leave without permission. "Precisely," she said. "But I reminded them you had full legal counsel, multiple signed evaluations, and that every move you've made is protected. I also mentioned the trust." "Ah," I said, "and that complicated things." Ginny's smile was small but sharp. Vanessa was unaware. She assumed she'd be managing the children's inheritance. Her reaction was loud. Of course it was. She's furious, claims you misled them, that you changed the plan. I shook my head. There never was a plan, just assumptions. Ginny nodded. And the letter, I asked, delivered yesterday with your contact details and the legal terms of the trust. I wrapped my fingers around my cup. It had gone cold, but I didn't care. Are you ready? Ginny asked. To turn your phone on? I looked out at the harbor. A pelican swooped low over the water, its wings brushing the surface before lifting off again. The sky was turning a pale, gentle gray. Storm weather on its way. Yes, I said. I think I am. Back at the cottage, I sat on the porch swing and watched the clouds gather. My hands trembled just slightly as I reached into my bag and pulled out the phone. It was heavier than I remembered. I powered it on. The screen lit up like a slot machine. Vibrations rattled the table. 127 missed calls, 89 voicemails, 243 text messages. I didn't check them all at once. I started with the first, from Clayton. Mom, where are you? Ella needs shoes for school. 2 days later, this isn't funny anymore, call me. 3 days after that, people are starting to worry. This is not okay. A week in, if this is about what Vanessa said at the barbecue, you're being overly sensitive. The tone changed with time, from frustration to panic, then to anger. Then came Vanessa's voice in a voicemail. Dorothy, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just disappear. Call back immediately. Another from Clayton. Are you out of your mind? Selling the house? Setting up some weird trust? I sat through them all, let them wash over me like radio static. Then, near the end, a voice I hadn't expected. Ella. Her message was small, simple. Grandma, are you okay? Dad's really mad and Mom keeps crying about money. I miss your cookies. Are you coming back? That one cracked me. Just a little. The others were noise. Hers was a melody. I was still holding the phone, still listening to the ocean when it rang. Clayton's number. I could have let it go to voicemail, could have sat there pretending I didn't see it. But instead, I answered. Hello, Clayton. A pause. Long enough for him to realize I wasn't a ghost. Mom. His voice cracked. He wasn't angry yet, not this time. But I could hear the tension behind his breathing, the way he was trying to stay composed. Where the hell have you been? He asked, the control already slipping. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? I left a note, I said, on the dining room table. That's not what I mean. No, I said softly. You mean why? He didn't answer, so I did. I took Vanessa's advice. What are you talking about? I looked out at the horizon, at the way the clouds hung low over the sea. At the barbecue, I said. She told me I could disappear and no one would miss me. And you laughed, Clayton. You laughed with her. There was another silence. Longer. That was a joke, he said finally. You know Vanessa. She talks big. She didn't mean... Actually, I said, I think that was the first honest thing she ever said to me. His breath came faster now. Sharper. You sold the house, he said, our family home, without telling us. It was my home, my name on the deed, my mortgage payments, my 43 years of upkeep. We had plans for that house, he snapped. Did you? I asked. Plans for me, or plans for when I was gone? He didn't answer. The wind picked up, rattling the wind chimes outside my window. The trust is ridiculous, he muttered. The kids don't need hoops to jump through. We've been saving for their future. Really? I asked. Because Vanessa told Mrs. Peterson at Christmas that she was counting on my money for their education, that you hadn't set up anything. His voice rose. You're twisting this. This isn't you. You've never been selfish before. That one hit me. Not because it was true, but because it wasn't. After a lifetime of sacrifice, being called selfish for finally choosing myself felt like a slap. I think you should come see me, I said quietly, alone, without Vanessa. Vanessa's my wife, he said sharply. We're a package deal. Not this time, I said. If you want to understand why I left, You'll come alone." The wind rustled the leaves. The sky darkened further. After a long pause, he said, "Fine. 3 days," he promised. He'd drive down in 3 days. I ended the call, let the phone fall gently into my lap. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. "Hello, Clayton?" A silence. Then a voice she hadn't heard in years. Not the angry man, but the boy she raised. "Mom?" "You left a note," Clayton said, "but you didn't say why." He said it the moment he spotted me through the cafe window. I watched him pause outside the entrance, hands stuffed in the pockets of his navy windbreaker, eyes scanning the harbor before settling on me. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. He used to walk into a room with all the certainty of a man who thought he'd earned the right to be listened to. Now he stood uncertain on the threshold, like a boy returning to a classroom after skipping a test. The door chimed softly as he stepped inside. I raised my hand just enough for him to spot me, already seated with 2 mugs of coffee between us, one black, one with cream, the way I remembered he liked it. He approached slowly, face unreadable, until he dropped into the chair across from me with a soft sigh. He didn't say hello, just that sentence. "You left a note, but you didn't say why." I met his eyes, didn't I? Outside, gulls shrieked and swooped between the pilings, and somewhere down the boardwalk a dog barked twice before falling silent. The harbor town of Seabrook Hollow bustled just behind the thin glass wall, strollers passing, fishermen hauling in lines, couples wandering between boutique shops. But inside the cafe, the air was still, thick with all the things he hadn't said, and all the things I finally would. I pushed the mug toward him. "I thought you might need that." He took it without thanks, didn't drink, just stared at the swirl of cream like he could read the past in its eddies. "You sold the house," he finally said. "Yes. You emptied your accounts. Some of them. You set up a trust." I nodded. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "It wasn't just the house, Mom. It was our home. The grandkids' home. The place we all came back to." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I'd heard that story before. So many times from other women, friends, church acquaintances, even women at the grocery store. The idea that a woman's home wasn't hers. It was the family's, a mausoleum of obligation. "Do you know," I said gently, "that the last time anyone visited that house without asking for something was 4 years ago? Ella came by to show me a school project." Before Vanessa started intercepting everything. His jaw tightened. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" He didn't answer. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, now powered on and resting calmly beside my napkin. "I saved everything," I said. "Every birthday card, every gift I mailed, every photo I took of the packages before I sent them. 5 years' worth. Want to see?" He looked like he didn't, but I handed him the phone anyway. He scrolled in silence. Images of wrapped boxes. Handwritten notes, tracking numbers, photos of watercolor paints, science kits, books with little inscriptions inside the front covers, each with dates, receipts, delivery confirmations, one after another, after another. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. I tilted my head. "Doesn't it?" His thumb froze on one image. "This is the watercolor set Ella wanted 2 birthdays ago. Vanessa told me you forgot." I didn't. He looked up. Confusion now replaced anger. Then came something worse. Doubt. "I confronted you about that," he said slowly. "I remember. I was angry. Told you to stop making promises you couldn't keep." I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. "She made it look like I'd failed you, again and again, because the less you trusted me, the more you relied on her. It was never just about the kids, Clayton. It was about control." He stared out the window, his reflection framed in the glass. A flicker of the boy I used to rock to sleep danced across his features. I reached across the table and gently retrieved the phone. I tried to tell you. Subtly at first, then directly. But you always defended her. She's my wife. She's their mother. But she's not above reproach. You don't owe her blind loyalty when it's built on a lie. His voice was quieter now. Why didn't you fight back harder? I looked at him for a long time, because for a while I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was just old, out of touch, too sensitive. But eventually I realized I was just tired. Tired of what? Of asking to be seen. The waitress came by and topped off our coffee without a word. Clayton offered her a tired smile, then slouched back in his chair. She says you're trying to turn me against her. I shook my head. She did that all on her own. She says you're bitter, that you've been planning this for years. I couldn't help it. I laughed, a dry, cracked sound. If I'd planned this for years, I wouldn't have waited until your daughter asked me if I was coming back for Christmas, and I had to lie and say I wasn't feeling well. She says, I held up my hand. Clayton, I said softly, I'm not here to argue with Vanessa. I didn't ask you to come because I wanted to attack her. I asked you to come alone so I could tell you the truth without her in your ear. He looked down at his hands. I don't know what to believe, he whispered. Believe what you saw on that phone. Believe your own memory. Believe that the woman who raised you didn't just stop loving her family one day. He rubbed his forehead. I should have seen it. Yes, I said. You should have. But we can't change what we missed. Only what we see now. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The harbor glinted through the window. Somewhere outside, a gull called sharply, answered by another in the distance. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally. Neither do I said honestly. But recognizing there's something broken, it's a start. He looked up, eyes damp but not crying. Can I see them? Of course, but not until you understand that this visit, this moment, it's not just about coming back to me. It's about showing them something different. He nodded slowly, then reached for his coffee at last, took a long sip, winced. It had gone cold. It's bad, he said. I smiled faintly. It was never the coffee. It was the company. He chuckled softly, then looked out the window once more. I told them I'd be gone for the day, he said. Didn't even say where. I'm glad you came, I said, and I'm glad you came alone. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering napkins across the patio and lifting the edge of the cafe's awning. A storm was coming, thunderheads rolling in from the east, heavy with promise. Clayton stood and picked up his jacket. Can I see the house? I looked at him, then shook my head. It's not mine anymore, and honestly, it never really felt like mine for years. He nodded slowly like he understood. He walked me back to the cottage. We didn't speak. The sidewalk was damp from the earlier drizzle, and the trees along the lane dripped methodically like ticking clocks. When we reached the gate, he paused, took in the flower boxes, the worn swing, the little sign by the porch that read, "Home is where you begin again." He cleared his throat. It suits you, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. It does. Recognizing it's broken is the first step. She pulled up in a silver Lexus and left the engine running, just long enough to let me know she didn't plan to stay long. I had just finished pruning the last of the rose bushes, fingers sticky with sap, when I heard the tires crunch against the gravel. I straightened, brushing dirt from my palms, and looked toward the edge of the drive. There it was, sleek, spotless, humming with air conditioning despite the late spring breeze. And there she was, Vanessa Brighton Linscott stepping out with surgical precision, a woman who came dressed for battle disguised as brunch. She wore white again, always white, like it might somehow bleach away the shadows beneath her eyes. Her sunglasses were oversized, designer, of course, and her heels pierced the soft dirt beside the walkway with each deliberate step. She didn't shut the car door behind her. She didn't plan to be here long, just long enough to reclaim what she believed had been stolen. I didn't move to meet her. I stood by the rose bush, gardening gloves still in one hand, shears dangling in the other. She stopped at the gate, letting her gaze travel over the cottage like she was appraising it for market. Her lips curled ever so slightly. "Eleanor," she said, her voice smooth as always, "what a charming little place you've found." I dropped the gloves into the basket at my feet and opened the gate. "Vanessa." Her eyes flicked to my hands, then to the porch behind me. "James told me he saw you, said you looked different." "Life does that," I said, stepping aside. "Would you like some iced tea?" She hesitated just for a moment, then smiled thinly. "I'm not here for a social call." I led her up the porch anyway. She followed, high heels ticking against the wood. Her gaze never stopped moving, scanning the rocking chair cushions, the chimes above the door, the ceramic sign beside the doorbell that read, "Peace lives here." Inside, I poured the tea without asking. She didn't touch hers, just leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed, eyes sharp behind the sunglasses she hadn't removed. "I know why you did it," she said. "You wanted to hurt us, to punish us." "No," I replied calmly. "I wanted to free myself." "From what, exactly?" "Your loving family?" I took a sip of my tea. "From the lie that I still had one." She scoffed, taking off her sunglasses and placing them carefully beside her untouched glass. "You've been planning this. The trust, the sale of the house, the documents, all of it. I started planning the day I realized I'd become invisible in my own life." "You're being dramatic." I gestured toward the table. "Shall we sit?" "I'll stand," she snapped. "Suit yourself." She stared at me then, hard. "The children miss you." "Do they? Or do they miss the things you told them I would give?" Her jaw tightened. "You've been incredibly selfish." "Interesting," I said softly, "coming from someone who erased my name from birthday cards and told them I'd forgotten." She paled, just slightly. "That's ridiculous." I walked to the cabinet, retrieved a small folder, and laid it gently on the table. Tracking numbers, purchase receipts, photos, 5 years' worth. Vanessa didn't move. "You didn't just want me gone," I continued. "You needed me erased, because you built your future on the idea that I wouldn't be around to challenge it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Clayton told you." "No, you did. With every cut, every dismissal, every moment you made me feel small. I never asked you for anything. You didn't have to. You took my time, my labor, my presence, and you gave nothing back but condescension." She stepped back from the table, eyes narrowing. "We've been generous. We gave you a purpose. Before us, you were just a lonely woman with a garden and some dusty china." I stared at her. "You needed me," I said. "Free childcare, holiday meals, someone to take the blame when things went wrong. But you never valued me, not once." She folded her arms. "The trust conditions are ridiculous. Ella and Lucas shouldn't have to earn what belongs to them. What belongs to them is safety and love and the ability to think for themselves. Not your plans for their future, but their own." Vanessa's voice rose. "Family money should stay in the family." "Which is exactly why I structured the trust that way, so it wouldn't pass through you." Her cheeks flushed. She looked for the first time like someone unsure which script to follow next. "This isn't over," she said through clenched teeth. "We're prepared to challenge everything, your mental state, your competence, all of it." "I expected that," I said. "That's why Ginny insisted on a full evaluation and documentation." She reached for her purse with a swipe of her hand, nearly knocking over the tea. "James will never forgive you for this," she spat. "Perhaps," I said, "but I'm finally forgiving myself for staying quiet for too long." She turned sharply, her heels clicking a warning across the floor. "You've destroyed everything," she hissed. "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending." She stormed out the front door without another word. I followed, slowly, stopping at the threshold as she yanked open the car door. For a moment, she sat in the driver's seat with the engine still running, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Then her phone lit up. She tapped something furiously. The tires kicked up dust as she peeled out of the driveway, disappearing around the bend in a flash of chrome and noise. I stood alone on the porch, a strange stillness settling over me. Once, her fury would have left me rattled for hours. Now it felt like wind chimes, loud, fleeting, and easily silenced. I went back inside and poured the tea into the sink. An hour later, my phone rang. James. I picked up on the second ring. "She went to see you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." A pause. Then, "I found the cards." My breath caught. "What?" "In her closet, a box tucked behind the suitcases. All the birthday cards, Christmas cards, even a few of the toys you sent. With return receipts." I pressed a hand to the counter. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have known." I closed my eyes. "It wasn't your job to suspect the woman you married." "It was my job to see you," he whispered. The silence stretched. "The kids still want to come this weekend," he said. "Is that still okay?" I looked out the window where the roses swayed gently in the breeze. "Of course," I said. "I'll be waiting." "The kids still want to come this weekend," he said. "Is that still okay?" Ella's voice echoed down the hallway, clear and bright. "Grandma, where's the pink paint?" As if she'd never left at all. I stood barefoot in the sunroom, morning light pouring through the wide windows and warming the hardwood beneath my feet. My hands were streaked with lavender paint and the scent of lemon oil from polishing the old cabinet I'd finally decided to restore. Somewhere in the kitchen, a radio murmured the soft hum of a jazz tune. Outside, the wind carried the clean promise of springtime, and the bay sparkled like it had been polished just for this day. "Top shelf in the corner cabinet, honey," I called back. She popped her head in a moment later, grinning, cheeks flushed with color and energy only a 10-year-old could carry. Her curls had grown out longer than I remembered, pulled up into a high, haphazard ponytail that bounced with every movement. "I found it!" she beamed, waving the tiny tin triumphantly. "And don't forget to spread newspaper first," I added. Lucas sat cross-legged in the corner with a battered sketchbook, drawing something intently. A lighthouse, maybe. Or the porch swing. He'd asked earlier if he could sketch how this place feels, and I told him he'd better do it quickly. Some feelings are only true for a moment. James sat on the edge of the porch, sipping coffee from the old ceramic mug I gave him years ago, one that somehow made its way back to me in a box of Goodwill donations. He hadn't said much since they arrived last night, but his presence was steady, like he'd finally understood the value of simply being. We hadn't talked about Vanessa in detail. Not yet. I sensed there were still loose threads to unravel between them, but something had shifted. He didn't look like a man coming to plead or justify. He looked like someone finally listening. Ella tugged at my apron. "Can we keep painting after lunch? I want to make it look like a candy store in here." "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "This weekend is yours." She smiled, then darted off, the little tin of pink rattling like a maraca in her hand. Later that afternoon, I spread out the picnic blanket in the backyard. The sun hung heavy in the sky, a late spring golden hour stretching toward eternity. We laid out deviled eggs, fresh fruit, ham sandwiches, and slices of cornbread. I poured lemonade into mismatched glasses, the kind I'd collected over the years because they felt like stories. Not a set, just pieces that belonged anyway. Lucas offered me a daisy he'd plucked from beside the garden. "For your hair," he said shyly. I tucked it behind my ear, heart swelling in that quiet way only a grandmother's heart knows. James set his plate down carefully. "You know, they keep asking when they'll get to come back." I looked up. "I told them that depends on you," he added gently. "I won't assume anything." I nodded. "Thank you." We ate in a soft sort of silence. Not awkward, just present. I found myself watching Ella dip her sandwich crusts in lemonade, laughing like it was a secret delicacy, and I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden they had to visit. I felt like a person they chose. After the plates were cleared, we sat beneath the willow tree at the edge of the property. The kids ran circles around it, tying ribbons to its lower branches, giggling as the wind carried them like little banners of their return. James exhaled slowly. "There's going to be a hearing," he said. I turned to him. "She's contesting everything, says you manipulated the kids, turned me against her, and made decisions under emotional duress." I raised an eyebrow. "Does she have any evidence?" "No." "But she has a lawyer who's loud enough to fill in the gaps." I reached beside me and handed him a file. "Then she'll need to yell over these." He opened it slowly. Inside were notarized letters, medical evaluations, timestamps from the trust transfer, and even statements from the post office employees who helped me track down the missing packages. James flipped through the documents, then looked at me with something like awe. "You planned for everything." "No," I said softly. "But I paid attention." He smiled faintly. "I underestimated you." "That makes two of us." We sat in quiet for a while. Then he asked the question that had probably been burning on his tongue since the day I left. "Do you think you'll ever come back?" I looked out at the water, the way it shimmered, endless and wide, like possibility itself, the way the air smelled cleaner here, the way my shoulders no longer felt like they carried the weight of everyone else's expectations. "No," I said, "but I think I'll keep the door open." He nodded. "That's fair." That evening, after they'd left, I sat alone in the cottage, sipping chamomile tea from my favorite chipped mug. The house was quiet again, but not empty. There were pink fingerprints on the windowsill and pencil shavings under the chair. A sketch of the lighthouse sat folded on the table, and on the fridge, Ella had pinned a crooked little magnet that read, "Eleanor's Art Studio." I smiled. I wandered into the spare bedroom, now a sunlit workspace with bookshelves and an old drafting table, and opened the drawer where I'd stashed the final envelope. Inside was the one letter I hadn't sent yet, addressed to the court, a final statement explaining my choices, my documentation, and my intent to file for a restraining order should Vanessa escalate. I placed it back into the drawer and shut it gently. Then I walked out to the porch and sat beneath the string lights I'd hung last summer. The night had fallen, but the stars were bold tonight, like pinpricks of defiance across the darkness. I took a deep breath, let the air fill me. I wasn't the same woman who once begged to be noticed. I wasn't invisible anymore. I'd become the author of my own ending, and maybe, just maybe, a few beginnings too. I wasn't invisible anymore. Sometimes peace doesn't come in the form of an apology. It arrives quietly, like morning light seeping through old curtains, slow, soft, steady. I used to think justice needed to be loud, a courtroom kind of thunder, but now I know it wears the face of quiet resolve. It's the sound of the screen door clicking shut behind you when you finally decide not to go back. It's the pen scratching across paper as you reclaim your name in documents no one expected you to read. It's knowing your own story matters, even if no one clapped for you when it began. I sat still in too many rooms, silenced myself in too many conversations, handed over too many sacrifices that were taken like entitlements, and for the longest time, I convinced myself that love required that level of disappearance. But it doesn't. Love isn't about how small you can make yourself for someone else's comfort. It's about truth, and truth is never cruel. It just refuses to lie to keep the peace. Looking back, I can trace every crack in the foundation, every eye roll, every "you're overreacting," every birthday that came and went without acknowledgement. Every holiday meal I cooked, then ate alone while the others smiled in rooms I wasn't invited into. The clues were always there. But like many women of my generation, I was taught to be grateful, just to be near the table, to never rock the boat, to confuse endurance with strength. But strength isn't staying silent. Strength is knowing when silence becomes complicity. I spent decades raising voices that never once asked about mine. I poured myself out into hands that let it slip through like I was replaceable. And when the day came that I was told to disappear, I did. But not the way they expected. No, I didn't vanish in shame. I walked away in purpose. I let go of the roles they cast me in: the doormat, the last-minute babysitter, the unpaid maid, the wallet disguised as a woman. I chose my own name again. I found a little cottage with a wide porch and a quiet bay, and learned how to breathe without asking permission. I rediscovered color. I picked up brushes, and brushes picked up me. I opened letters meant for me, and I stopped making excuses for those who didn't bother to send them. And when the storm came knocking, when entitlement dressed itself in rage and tried to claw back what it thought was its birthright, I didn't raise my voice. I raised my evidence. I lifted the truth. And in the face of that truth, the noise had nowhere to hide. Justice didn't come in handcuffs or headlines. It came in silence. It came in a granddaughter's laughter echoing in the hallway, in a son's voice thick with apology, in the sight of my name, only my name, etched into the title of a home that no one could take from me. It came in the absence of fear, in knowing that I would never again be erased inside my own life. It came in the realization that peace isn't passive. It's the result of hard choices, of painful honesty, of saying no more and meaning it all the way down to your bones. If you're still listening, I want you to know something. You're not too late. You're not too quiet. You're not too old. You are not the sum of how others failed to see you. You're not the background music to someone else's story. You are the author. You are the ink. And you have every right to start a new chapter, even if the page is decades old. Some stories bloom later. Some roots take longer to stretch toward the sun. But that doesn't make their bloom any less beautiful. I once believed that being needed was the same as being loved, that sacrificing everything for others was the highest form of devotion. But love that requires you to disappear isn't love. It's control. And control wears many faces. Sometimes a soft voice, sometimes a dismissive laugh, sometimes a birthday that never comes. But once you name it, once you stop feeding it, it starves. And something new gets to grow. To every woman who's been told she's too much or too little, to every mother, grandmother, aunt, or neighbor who's been used but never honored, to every soul who gave until there was nothing left but silence, I see you. You're not alone, and you are not finished. If this story moved you, if you felt even one moment of recognition, one flicker of strength, one heartbeat of truth, I invite you to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they'll see themselves in it too. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories where quiet strength triumphs, where truth comes home, where the forgotten find their way forward, subscribe to our channel. There's more to tell, always more. As for me, I'll keep painting. I'll keep walking to the water with chamomile in hand. I'll keep answering the knock of my grandchildren's laughter. And I'll keep reminding myself every single day that kindness is a gift, but it is not an obligation, that love is earned, not demanded. And that dignity is never up for negotiation. My philosophy remains. They mistook my silence for weakness, but it was strength in its most patient form. I found my way home, not to a place, but to myself. And I hope if you need to, you'll find your way too.